Hey, what's up guys, this is Terabyte, and welcome back to Asagao Academy. So we're going to go back to our whole thing about trying to see John, and hopefully we'll join the play this time, but let's see. Even when we did, we were almost never alone. Mai was in my room, PBG in his, students wandering the fields and hallways. With all the time I wasn't spending with John, I started to reconsider his proposal. As insulting as was his belief that I would make his sincerely the best tree in his side of the Pacific, I had no doubt he sincerely meant it as a compliment. John was prone to putting his foot in his mouth. He was blunt and straightforward, and usually said exactly what he meant, even if that wasn't the most tactful thing to do, or even what his true feelings on the situation were. Besides, if you looked at it in a different way, being a tree really was a special kind of talent. One had to remain still and totally lack presence. Apparently, ninjas trained hard to develop this kind of ability, and here I had it naturally. It's a good way to look at it. Sure, pretending to be a tree wasn't exactly as cool as being a ninja, but it would be kind of cool to be in a play. Due to my stage fright, I had never been in one. If I didn't have to speak to be a tree, it would be the perfect role. I didn't think any other opportunity as perfect as this would come again. So with these totally reasonable and not at all reaching justifications in mind, I went to class to talk to John. But John wasn't in class that day. It was unusual, but not totally unexpected. John was falling behind with preparations for the play and had been working hard. It wouldn't surprise me if he skipped class to build a set or review costume designs. So when class finally ended, I headed to the theater, intent on accepting John's offer and helping any way I possibly could. I opened the door to the theater, it creaking with what felt like deliberate menace. The light from the open doorway cascaded through the audience seats and down to the stage, but nobody came. The house lights were off, only a few lights dimly lit on the stage. Maybe the drama club didn't meet every day? But it was weird to have those lights left on if nobody was around. I wasn't about to go fiddling in the dark with the stage equipment, though. Maybe John was resting in his dorm room. I turned to leave when something made me pause. Was that a sniff? Someone was whimpering. Concerned, I stepped down toward the stage. Hello? Is anybody here? My voice echoed, bouncing off the walls backstage. There was a slight chill to the air the further down I went, and the stillness caused goosebumps to creep up my arms. I heard it again, but this time to my right. Hesitantly, I followed the sound, heart pounding hard enough to shake my vision. A dark form emerged, huddled against the wall. Who are you? What are you doing in here? I took another step closer, and my vision adjusted. It was John, hunched over something in his hands. His face was pale and lined with smudged tears and sweat. It looked like he hadn't moved in hours. John? I rushed to his side as he attempted to stifle his sobs. He reached an arm toward me, and I took his hand in mine. It's terrible. What happened? Are you sick? Are you hurt? With another stifled cry, John shifted. In his lap was a tangled mess of wire, bolts, and green. Oh no! Realization hit me like a pot shattering against the floor. That can't be. Jacques, he's... John stared at the mess in his lap, shaking his head. What happened? John howled, crouching over Jacques' mess of a body again, and I checked myself. It was too soon, and John was too volatile in a state to really be talked to. I instead rubbed his back, trying to talk in a soothing voice. Well, it's okay. It'll be okay. He's a robot, so he can be repaired. He can be rebuilt if worse comes to worse. John continued shaking his head, completely inconsolable. I had no idea whether Jacques couldn't be fixed, or if he was just losing it. Instantly, I shifted into caretaker mode. I gently placed a hand on the side of John's head, stilling his near-constant shaking, and pushed it to my shoulder. Shh. It'll be okay. We're going to figure something out. It'll be okay. Focus on the sound of my voice, okay? I'm still here. You're still here. It'll be okay. I tried to murmur calming things, humming songs, gently rocking him back and forth. Back when I was still living with my father and started having panic attacks, this is what he would do to calm me down. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it to work for John, too. Eventually, John's trembling calmed. He sniffed, then he wrapped an arm around me, hugging me like a teddy bear. We stayed like that for a while. I don't know how much time passed, but I eventually lost feeling in my legs. Finally, John spoke. Jacques is the most important thing to me. What am I going to do if I don't have him? I pulled out of our embrace, searching his face. You'll be all right, John. You're much stronger than you think. Believe me. John swallowed, turning away from me. From somewhere within, he gathered the strength to pull himself together. After another second or two, he sat back on his heels and looked at me. Thanks, Hannah. He was still very clearly upset, but at least he was coherent. I nodded. Maybe there's a way we can fix him. I'm not sure, but when I saw him like that, His breathing sped up again, the beginnings of hyperventilation. I recognized them from my own experience. I stroked his hand. It's okay. We'll take him and see right now. Let's just focus on that for now. Until we know for sure, let's focus on what's happening right now. John nodded solemnly. With a gentle hand, he took off his jacket and turned to Jacques, or what was left of him. He placed everything in his jacket, then bundled it all up together in his arms. When he had checked that there were no holes bolts could drop out of, he nodded at me. Let's go. We rushed from the theater to Bluebell House, heads down to avoid eye contact with the students. Thankfully, due to the chill in the air and the lack of sun, few students were out. Neither of us were interested in answering questions that were sure to come up once people saw the look on John's face. When he finally made it to Bluebell House, John asked me to fish the keys from his pocket. I did so, ignoring the blush that fought to rise in my cheeks, somewhat irritated that even in such a grave circumstance my mind wandered to other things. Finally, I pushed the door open and John rushed in. As I followed, I checked the hallway. No one had come out of their rooms. We were, as far as I could tell, safe. John went straight to his desk in the back of the room, where the small metallic contraption was attached to his computer. Seeing as it was Jacques' size, I assumed it was where he slept, or charged. I sat on the couch, trying hard not to make a sound. John was, for the moment, not utterly consumed by grief. I was terrified that something I said or did would break the spell. Thankfully, PBG was nowhere to be found. More than likely, he was on the field practicing for Asagao's first game against the Hatoful High. I wonder if that is the one that also has burbs. That would be hilarious. John placed Jacques' remains on his desk and unwrapped his jacket, moving painstakingly so as not to alter the positions of the wires or gears more than they already had been. When he finally finished, he put on his jacket without seeming to realize what he was doing. Those jackets were more like their second skins, it seemed. As Jean paused to survey the damage, I peered over his shoulder at the tangled mess. Jacques' head and claws were still visible. Sort of. Some of his feathers were burned off, along with the chips in the internal wiring. Wires were cut, edges blunted. Something that looked like a microchip had a dent in it. One of his wings was completely detached from his body. John turned to me and I hesitantly shook my head. I don't really know anything about robotics. John wiped his face with his hands, pushing his skin up towards his hairline. I know a bit, but not enough to fix this. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Poor guy, jeez. I didn't expect it to get this heavy again. Oh. Where did you buy him? You could probably take him back. They could fix it. Jacques was made by a monk who lives in a technological empire on a mountaintop in Tibet. Or at least he did. He's dead now. I still get updates through the guy's grandchildren. They update the operating system for him because it was easier than figuring out how some old man managed to make both a fully functional AI and robotic bird shell and stick the two together. I see. What were we gonna do? It was a question I didn't need to ask. John's head was shaking once again, some kind of compulsive movement he must not have even realized was happening. He didn't say anything. I had never lost a pet. My father and I couldn't afford pets, not on his salary alone. But I knew a lot about grief, the echoing pain of a sudden absence. The absence of someone who was always there for you, the sudden feeling of living in a world with no safe harbor, in a world where only you could look after yourself. I laid a hand on John's shoulder. Do you want to be alone? The edges of John's lips raised in what must have counted as a smile, given the circumstances. Thank you, Hana. He sat down in his desk chair and became as still as a rock. Before I left, I grabbed a blanket sitting on what I assumed was John's bunk and draped it around his shoulders. I had a feeling he'd be like that for a while. As I approached the door, John stirred from his reverie. Please don't tell anyone about this, Hana. Please. I nodded. He turned back to his desk. I crept out of the room, shutting the door gently behind me. PBG would come back from practice eventually, and he would find John there. PBG had a very calming personality. He'd be able to handle things. He'd be able to help a little, at least keep watch over John. I wish there was more I could do. But it wasn't until I was on my walk home that the full impact of what happened hit me. I was so caught up in helping John overcome his shock that I forgot that I, too, knew and cared for Jacques. Not as much as John. No way. But I'd grown fond of the little bird's snark. He's not going to sass me ever again, is he? Oh. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks, and I wiped my face and doubled my pace. Like John, I didn't want people to see me cry. Of course, there was no way I could avoid Mai. Not when I lived with her. I opened the door to my room, and as soon as I saw the flickering movements of Mai's gold sweater, I ducked my head.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Hana. How'd the whole tree thing go? Good? I turned away, setting my bag on the floor next to my desk. Then I stood and stared at it. I hadn't really thought past getting to my room. I was just trying to get to it so that I wouldn't explode in front of everybody, so I had some place to process things. Now Mai was here. It was all I could do to hold myself together. Planning the next step had fallen to the wayside. Hana, are you alright? You don't look too good. I swallowed. Yeah, standing around like a zombie wasn't a good way to get people to not worry about you. That is very true. I attempted a bright smile. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? My chin wobbled in the middle of my reply, and the look on Mai's face told me she didn't trust me as far as she could throw a semi-truck. That's right, she's ridiculously strong. I forgot about that. Come here. Mai sat down on my bed and patted the space next to her. I glanced from her to the door. If I wanted to, I could run to the bathroom. If I did, a stall would definitely be empty, and I could cry by myself in peace. Mai would still know something had happened, but at least we wouldn't have had to deal with the awkwardness that was someone crying in front of you and not knowing how to comfort them. Mai followed my gaze to the door, then slapped the bed. Sit! I obediently sat down next to her. I mean, what else are you gonna do? She turned to face me full on. The presence of her big, empathetic eyes staring at me was uncomfortable. I grabbed Mr. Bunny. Mr. Bunny had always been there for me in times like these. He was the only one who saw me cry about things like this. I buried my face into his soft fur. Tell me what's wrong, Hana. You can't always keep things to yourself. You already do that way too much. I do not. My voice was muffled by Mr. Bunny's fur, but Mai just chuckled. Uh-huh. Sure you don't, because I can't hear you crying in your bed on bad nights. Immediately, heat sprung to my face. Had I woken her? How many times had she heard me? Why hadn't she said anything? I rubbed my hands together, shaking my head. Mai stared at me, patiently, like a Buddhist monk in meditation. I sighed. But then another thought occurred to me. As sad as I was about Jacques' passing, John was even more upset. Far more upset. He asked me not to tell anybody, so what was I supposed to do? It might be nice to tell Mai, but it's not really any of my business. It must be if you're heaving sighs like that. She wrapped an arm around my back, resting her head on my shoulder. Come on, Hana, lay it on me. The old Meister's got you covered. She really is a good friend. This is very sweet. She nuzzled her head into my shoulder, and my heart squeezed. Well, I ran into John today in the theater. When I went to look for him, and at first it looked like nobody was there. But I heard a noise, and I found him crouched in a corner, and I auditioned for the role, but I didn't go as well as I thought I would, and now I might not be getting the part. I winced a little as the lie slipped through my mouth. Mai didn't deserve dishonesty from me. But at the same time, John was a private person. He didn't trust easily, and this was very clearly a private matter, one that didn't belong to the rest of the gossip that spread daily between classroom doors. It wasn't necessarily that I thought Mai would tell people if she knew, but the potential harm was far, far too great for me to even cave in a moment of weakness. Even if I was sad, even if I was grieving again, even if I could use some comfort. Aw, Hana. Man, what is up with that kid? He's always so rude. He spent all this time telling you were perfect for the part. Now he's going back on his word? Don't worry, Hana. You're still the best tree in my eyes, and we both know that's what matters most. Mai winked, then pulled me into a hug. I'm sorry that you're sad, though. I do hope you end up feeling better soon. Life's too short to spend it worrying about some dumb boy. Tears once again filled my eyes, and I patted Mai's arm. Thank you, Mai. Thank you. Alright, and I think that's where I'm gonna have to leave this episode. Man, a lot happened there. Poor John. Oh. I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully it's much happier.